Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt on KLUP 930 AM The Answer. Podcasts everywhere, Facebook, YouTube, and talklawradio.com. Today we're talking with a very special guest, Professor Jeffrey Addicott, who has his Doctor of Laws, also 2 Master of Laws degrees, and spent 20 years in the military teaching the military how to comply with law. Welcome back to the show, Professor. Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to have a great looking tombstone if the rapture doesn't occur first.
Before the break, you talked about the part of the code that says that what a terrorist organization is, and you mentioned a court case about a group in Dallas that did support Hamas, and they are serving in prison now. Let's define what is material support besides money.
Yeah. So there's 2 elements, as you correctly point out, Todd. One is, what is material support? And the statute defines it primarily as money, but it also can be that you go to a training camp, and we convicted a lot of individuals in this country that, went into the Taliban training system and, the Al-Qaeda training camps, rather, and they, provided training, direct training to that organization, and they participated in that organization. But most of the cases are about, you're providing money. And again, this is difficult for many Muslims, because part of the requirements in Islam is for you to give to a charity. That's part of their formula. One of the pillars of Islam is to give to a charity. So a lot of Muslims that, they unknowingly gave money to the Holy Land Foundation, because on their website, they don't say we're supporting Hamas, the terrorist organization. They're very secretive about it. And so people that gave money to the Holy Land Foundation, they weren't convicted because they lacked the knowledge element, the mens rea, as we say, as you know. But the 5, senior leadership members of the organization, many of them had direct links to Hamas, family members. I mean, it was an overwhelming amount of evidence. They were convicted because they knowingly did it.
Okay.
And also, as an ad note, you might have heard of CARE, which is a very strong political organization here in this country that, says that they represent Muslims in America. They were an unindicted co-conspirator in that case as well.
Okay. So what about the conspiracy? Could that happen?
Well, in the Holy Land Foundation case, it did. They were able to prove that they were conspiring to directly, in other words, they were lying. Their public front was we're a charity, but behind the scenes, it was clear that they knew exactly that money was going to pay, for example, the so-called martyrs and the families of martyrs, and money to actually people that were organizing and engaging in terror. They were able to prove that. Hence, you got the 65 years. For 2 of them got 65 years in jail.
So,
and the fine also was $12.4 million.
Okay. Will the students at universities that have been attending rallies somehow get in trouble for supporting a terror organization?
Well, no, because we have our First Amendment, as you're well aware of that. I know you know these answers already, so thank you for having me to say them. Yeah. So in other words, freedom of speech. You can praise Osama bin Laden, or whatever you want.
There's a lot of cases about the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, exactly. When the ACLU used to be involved in protecting freedom of speech, they actually, went to bat protecting the KKK's right to hold a rally. Today, they have degenerated into an organization that only is concerned with one side of the political spectrum. But true libertarians, you have the right to be an idiot. You have the right to say, the most outrageous things, support, like, as I said, Osama bin Laden. You can hang the communist flag in your office, or the Hamas flag, or the ISIS flag. Not illegal. It's only illegal when you engage in violence, conspire to engage in violence, Material Support Act, as we discussed, solicit someone to engage in violence, and that's the criminal part of it. So students that are running around, supporting Hamas, any rational person would say to themselves, these people, one, are either totally uneducated and propagandized, or they're just stupid.
There was a rally or a protest at the Capitol recently, and somebody commented on my LinkedIn post about whether or not those people were going to be arrested, just like the protest on January 6th. But I haven't seen that. Have you?
Yeah, they arrested, I think, between 200 and 300 of them, but I doubt if any of them were put in pretrial confinement. They were probably released rather quickly because sadly, there's a political element to everything. If the Democrats are in power, the Republicans will always say you're doing a lousy job. If the Republicans are in power, the Democrats will always say you're doing a lousy job.
Mm-hmm.
So we, as mainstream America, we kind of go through the politics, put it aside, and see what's really happening. But yes, they trespassed into the rotunda. They were chanting and parading around, as most of the January 6 people were. The small minority were engaged in fisticuffs and low levels of violence. To my knowledge, they weren't engaging in violent behavior, but they were doing what the massive people did on January 6th, is just you trespassed and you're parading. But again, I'm not involved with the Department of Justice, but I do know arrests were made. I don't know, what the follow-up is going to be in those cases. But again, back to your original question, people have the right to be wrong, and that's part of the beauty of America. And as most of us, we're very tolerant. You dress the way you want to dress. You can, express views that you want to express. That's what we're all about.
Mm-hmm.
And we're supposed to debate those, and hopefully the truth will be stronger than falsehoods, and people will basically come around to the truth. And the truth in this case, of course, you see so many, so much disinformation from these groups. Just if you just Google it, you can see that Israel is not an occupier. They are a state. They have a little card at the United Nations that says Israel on it.
Mm-hmm.
They have the right to exist. They have their borders. So how can you be a colonial occupying power? And again, the goal of Hamas is to take over the entire state of Israel. They believe they're illegitimate.
Well,
it's not true.
I'm sure you wrote about this in your book called Radical Islam. Why? But just briefly for the listeners today, there is that argument that those at the rally are making that the Palestinians were there first. Do you know who was there first, and does it matter?
Yeah, I don't know who was there first because that's been, 10,000, 15,000 years ago. But we do know one thing about human history. You show me any piece of land and somebody was there first. If you just take Texas,
Mm-hmm.
we're United States now. Before that, we were the Confederate States of America. Before that, it was the United States of America. Before that, it was the Republic of Texas. Before that, it was Mexico. Before that, it was Spain. Before that, it was Comanche. So whatever group wants to get together and say we're reclaiming the land that used to be ours, that argument was washed away in 1945. It's illogical in any event because every place used to be somebody, and you
Mm-hmm.
can call that person that's there now a colonial power or a crusader or what do you want to call it. It's irrelevant. The starting point is 1945 when the United Nations was created, and the vast majority of nations have signed the charter, and that's the starting point. Are you a member of the United Nations? We don't care where you came from. We don't care what the history was. That was Saddam Hussein's excuse when he went into Kuwait. That used to be our 12th province. Well, maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but that's irrelevant. It's Kuwait today. And the same argument with Israel. It's Israel today. They have the right to exist as a nation state. They're recognized by the United Nations. They're recognized by the vast majority of countries in the world. They are not colonializers. They're not occupiers. They have a state. Now, the issue is, do the Palestinians want a state? Because nations rise and nations fall. Yes, they want a state. I'm not opposed to the Palestinians having a state. But if you're, if you're a peacemaker and you want to try to solve this problem and not just engage in hyperbole, you quickly realize that Israel is like the size of New Jersey. There's not enough land, let alone for the 9 million Israelis there, than the millions of Palestinians. I would say Egypt and Jordan, which have huge countries, why don't you step up to the plate, carve off a piece of geography, and make it a Palestinian state? Problem solved.
But even Israel has in the past offered to give them
Yes.
land for their own state, and they rejected it.
Yes, that's President Clinton. When you negotiate as a lawyer, we like to negotiate. That's what we lawyers do. Most cases are settled by negotiation. We loosen up our tie. I don't have one today. And you would say to the other party, what would you want? Well, if you had a Hamas person sitting across the table from you, their response would be, thank you very much for that question. I want to kill you. That doesn't leave us a counteroffer.
Right.
Yes, it's true that the Israelis gave the Palestinian representatives, Yasser Arafat at the time, 95% of everything they wanted on the table. That's pretty good. If I can negotiate and get 95% of what I want, I'm going to take that deal.
Mm-hmm.
And they rejected it because that tells you everything you need to know. They're not interested in resolving this issue. Their interest lies, as the Hamas charter says, we want to kill you all. And they've shown it with their despicable acts on October the 7th.
So let's talk about just war theory. What do they still follow that? What is the theory now?
So just war theory is it's a Catholic Church tradition, and it deals with when do you go to war. And there's several elements to it, and they look at the cost and benefit, who's the aggressor, who started the war, proportionality, things like that.
It's related to the law of self-defense, right?
Yes, related to law of self-defense. But that's kind of all today in the international community. We don't use that term anymore. I use it myself in academic papers, but the measuring stick now is the UN Charter since 1945. And in there, Article 51, it says every nation has the inherent right to defend themselves if they are attacked. And then it gives the Security Council, which is the 5 permanent members, the authority to determine who is the aggressor in any given, fight. Well, in this case, so our analysis starts with Article 2.3 and 2.4 says that all nations must settle disputes by peaceful means, negotiation, settlement. And if you can't settle it by peaceful means, then you go to the Security Council and ask them to arbitrate it for you. Well, again, Hamas is not a nation state, but they're still tied under those rules. They're kind of like a virtual state, like Al-Qaeda, I suppose. And so so the question is, who started this particular war that we're in right now? And any normal, rational person can tell you that Hamas is the one that blew the holes in the wall, came in and slaughtered, almost 1,500 Israelis.
Innocent people.
The body count is still being counted. And they took about 200 plus hostages and all the stuff that we saw with it, the rape, the burning, the pillaging, just atrocities that shock the conscience.
And that all fits under the definition of terror.
Yeah, and those are acts of terror, which is true, but they're also illegal acts. Even a nation at war can't engage in those acts. They're illegal under the law of war. And of course, they're illegal under any concept of human consciousness. So they started this war. And a lot of people now that support the Palestinians, well, we want a ceasefire. It doesn't go that way. You don't get to do these atrocities and say, okay, let's have a ceasefire until the next group of atrocities. Israel has the right under Article 51 to defend themselves, and also the inherent right, and also to get any allies to join them in this process. And thankfully, this president has seen fit to provide at least some support to Israel. And so they've got to go in and do what they've got to do. They've got to clean out the Hamas organization. Will there be casualties? Yes, that's the nature of war. But the difference is the Israelis, they don't target civilians. That's not true, as we saw with the propaganda with the hospital bombing. When I heard that, when it first came out on CNN, and they just picked it up and ran from the Hamas propaganda puppets, I knew it was false. I've worked with the IDF. I've been there. They don't target hospitals. And so finally the truth came out. But yeah, there will be casualties because the law of war allows, if you're targeting a military target, collateral damage, you don't target the civilians, but if they die, then it's allowed under the law of war. It's not a war crime. And we know that Hamas actually uses civilians to put them in hospitals, so you won't, and they put their missiles.
We got to take a break. We'll be right back.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Each week, attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law. Don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the 10 Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.